I think it's interesting. Sustainability has different meanings for different people. And it's even within the organization, outside the organization, external stakeholders. For me, I like to keep it simple. Sustainable means endure. It's the ability for an organization to endure through cycles, generating win-win conclusions and outcomes for all stakeholders concerned. That's a simple way of looking at sustainability. People need to realize that there are benefits of having you operate in their space, because the mining industry by nature is a very intrusive industry. You go in and you dig up the earth and you process the earth. So people need to welcome you there and also need to be satisfied that they are key in terms of actually sharing the outcome which you're producing. And at the end of the day, mines by nature are depleting assets. So one day the mine will close. And what is important is that you don't leave a ghost town behind. When we launched our business strategy in 2013, the core of the business strategy was delivering sustainable, underline the word sustainable, improvement in cash flow and returns. And we said that was going to be the North Star which we are going to shoot for, and we are going to deliver that by using 5 pillars. The first being the core, which is the foundation, and I'll come on to foundation later on, but it covers aspect of safety, it covers people, and it covers sustainability. The second pillar is to ensure that we have got a flexible balance sheet which will enable us to survive through tough times and also help us during good times. The third pillar in the strategy, which was the critical one, which was around how do we actually reduce the overall cost of producing gold, what we call as all-in sustaining cost, and how do we move it as a competitive advantage to the lowest quartile within the global peer group. And we said we are going to achieve that through productivity improvements, production improvements, portfolio enhancements, and cost management, and capital discipline, irrespective of where the money is being spent. The fourth pillar of that strategy was to ensure that you actually reinvigorate your portfolio by effectively improving the quality of the portfolio. And it's an ongoing exercise where you basically bring new mines onto production and you release old mines by selling them, or you effectively put them down to closure. And the final pillar, being the fifth pillar, was around how do we preserve long-term optionality, recognizing that mining is a long-term game, and at the end of the day you need to have options that you can use when the gold price were to move up, because that provides you the growth imperative going out into the future. So we built that on that basis. But we recognized that the foundation is the critical pillar here, because it's like any house. If you don't have a strong foundation, it's a matter of time before the house of cards comes crumbling down. And we said the first aspect there, in line with our values, was going to be safety. A safe business is a profitable business, and it's a sustainable business. So we said safety is one area where we won't compromise. Our aim here is zero harm. Second area is that we retain and we have the best people within the industry, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are going to be able to deliver the business strategy for the company. And the third aspect of the foundation was the broader sustainability piece, of which safety is an element of it. And that would include areas like environment, it would include areas like water and energy, it will include community, it would include security, stakeholder relationship, the lot. What we recognize as part of the foundation and why sustainability is integrated into the strategy is critical for a business to be able to survive in the long term. It needs to have, retain, and continue to effectively nurture your social license to operate. You do need it when you enter to operate a mine. You need it when you are operating a mine, and at some stage when the mine goes into closure, you need to ensure that you do justice to your social license to operate. That's how we put the various pieces of the strategy together. That's why we've built the structure effectively like a pentagon, where they all feed into one another. And you can't actually deal with one piece thinking that you can deal with it on its own without it having an impact and impacting the other pieces of the strategy. They all have to move in together. So rather than actually devising it in individual pieces and then integrating, we said, let's integrate the various pieces in the strategy before we roll it out. so that then people are not puzzled on how they actually integrate the pieces together. You've done the integration and you present it as a holistic strategy. I think that's been my single biggest disappointment for the year, for an otherwise exceptional year. When we launched the strategy in 2013, we were very clear that we want to strive towards zero harm. And one fatality is one fatality too many. We were pleased that we saw a reduction in the level of accidents, especially the fatal accidents, recognizing that one was one too many, but they had actually showed a decreasing trend in 2013 and in 2014. Unfortunately, in 2015, that trend reversed for the worse in South Africa, where we nearly saw the number of fatal accidents double. And that was across all of the business units rather than any particular concentration on any particular business unit. So that's been a source of disappointment for us, and it came during the second and the third quarter of 2015. But we have moved very quickly to arrest that trend, and certainly what we saw in the fourth quarter of last year and to date in the first quarter of this year, we are starting to see us return back to the trends we saw in 2014, which is quite encouraging. But we are still journey away from getting to zero harm. But that's our goal, and we will work tirelessly till we get there. In fact, what we did as a company is, and this was with the board and the executive committee, we worked with the SA region, our South African region, bearing in mind that they work in quite challenging conditions at depth and seismically active areas. And we said, what are we going to do as a collective group? Because the idea of blaming culture doesn't work. When you show one finger at someone, the balance three fingers point back to you. So how do we pull together a strategy that can see us get towards zero harm in a sustainable manner? And we said there are going to be a number of core aspects which we need to build to deliver that strategy. The first one is around knowledge of skills. You've got to ensure that people who are working have the requisite knowledge and the skills to ensure that they operate in a safe environment. They fully recognize that if it's unsafe, that they can actually stop working in that regard. Secondly, it's behavior and attitude. Risk tolerance is by nature a human being trait, so people tend to push the envelope to a point where it's a point where you actually tip over. So it's important that we build the right behavior and attitude across the business, and we also hold people accountable in terms of their behavior and attitude at the supervisory level in particular. Then what we also said is it's inappropriate to have a safety strategy independent of how we plan and operate a mine and how we operate a business. So we said, as part of doing our mine planning in its entirety, what we will also do is to see how we actually mine safely, and we build it into our mine planning, and included in that are systems and procedures. And finally, we said that we will need to remove people from risk, and here I'm talking on both scenarios where you physically remove people from high-risk areas and or use of technology to be able to exploit that gold better without safety incidents. And there, the one thing which we can showcase to the world is our reef boring technology in Tautona, where we've been mining that area, which is a shaft pillar, without any drilling and blasting and reef boring. And touch wood, we have not had a fatal accident in that area, despite mining a shaft pillar. So those are the four areas we want to build the safety strategy in terms of South Africa. I think we have done a lot of heavy lifting from 2013. It was a very challenging environment. The advantage AngloGold Ashanti had was we were first mover in terms of anything we did. In terms of actually tackling head-on the cost overrun within the gold industry, we were the first one to move, and we moved at a faster pace. In terms of addressing our balance sheet, we were not the world's biggest highly indebted company, but we were the first one to stand up and say, hey, we have a debt problem, and we moved proactively to address that. The same in terms of sustainability as well. Going into 2016, what we are going to see is volatility in the gold price. No one can predict what the price at which we are going to sell our outputs, nor can we predict the currencies. What is clear from the fourth quarter of last year going into this year is we are going to see lots of volatility in the gold price and in terms of our currencies. Our job as a management team is to ensure that we don't take the foot off the pedal. At the end of the day, we mine gold and we mine cash flow, and we've got to ensure that our margins stack up both in bull and bear markets. So that's going to be priority one, continuing to do what we are doing well for sort of several years, and particularly in the last 3 years, what we have delivered in terms of margin improvements. Secondly, turning the South African business around, which had a bad 2015. So in that regard, we want to be able to improve the safety record, which we see is the single biggest lever to deliver a 10% improvement in production and cost in South Africa. That's the second priority. The third priority, obviously, is going to be Abuasi, the mine in Ghana, which is currently in limited operations, which is going to consume a disproportionate amount of our time. And the fourth area is to ensure that we offer maximum leverage in terms of our shareholders, whether it be on account of gold price, whether it be on account of widening of margins, and enabling them to enjoy some of the currency benefits as well. Because the risk you often find is when, after a period of austerity, when the gold price starts to rally, people tend to take the foot off the pedal, and we go back to doing things which we used to do, which cost shareholders returns. So our objective here is to ensure that we still keep the foot on the pedal, to ensure that we actually continue in the path which we had laid so well in the last 3 years. Where does sustainability fit into this area? It's quite an integral part of it, because safety, as I've outlined, has the ability to make an operation both productive and disruptive, depending on how you actually choose to deal with safety. So that's going to be pillar number one. And in terms of the overall sustainability, whether you take environmental, whether you take community, whether you take security, whether you take whatever aspect of sustainability, it's critical that we retain our social license to operate. Because of the jurisdictions where we operate in, the governments are going to be under pressure, because their currencies are tumbling and they've got dollar obligations to meet. So we are going to come under pressure from various host governments who are trying to balance their books as well. So in that regard, having the social license to operate is going to be critical, because it's the community around your mine site which acts as both as your ambassador and your first and probably only line of defense when such claims come against you. So in that regard, sustainability is going to be a critical component of our strategy. And historically, it's been an existential component. We now need to start to use it to be a competitive advantage to differentiate us vis-a-vis the other companies.